Hey, good afternoon. Okay, so this month we're going to be talking all about software and solutions and systems and what you really need to run your business. Whether you are a bookkeeper or a freelancer of any kind. And I know that a bunch of you on this page are considering buying bookkeeper training school, right, as a solution as well. And so I just want to talk a little bit about 4 questions that you should ask before you buy the next shiny thing. Okay. And that might be, that can be anything from like a robot vacuum, which I'm a big fan of, to a piece of software for your business. Or, if you see the ads that are like, you must buy this thing. This is the thing that's going to revolutionize your life or your business. Let's talk about the 4 questions that you should consider. Okay. So the first question that I want you to ask yourself, right? And I'd love to know, those of you who are watching, like, what is that shiny thing that you're seeing ads for right now? Or maybe you're seeing like, oh my God, if I just had something that would do this, my life would be so much better. I'd love to know what that is for you if you're watching this right now. Okay, so the first question I want you to ask before you buy any sort of solution is, I want you to ask yourself, do you have a problem? Do you have a problem? And I know that seems like a really basic question, but I think a lot of times we buy things, whether it's, like I said, whether it's, a piece of technology or a piece of software, or even just, the 39th travel mug that you have in your house, right? And I know this is not just me. Do you have a problem? Like, is there something, right, for a solution to solve? And if the answer to that is no, then don't buy. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit, in a couple minutes about how do you determine, okay, if you do have a problem, then how do you know if the problem is big enough to purchase the solution? One thing we did, we're between cleaning people right now. And it's like, okay, well, what can we do to help make our lives easier? We have a problem. Kristen doesn't have time to clean. Jeff doesn't have time to clean because we're running the business and running our lives. And what are we going to do? And so he said, do we have a problem? Yes, we have a problem, right? Yes, we have a problem. We need help cleaning the house. And what are we going to do? And it wasn't just, bringing somebody in, once a week to clean or once every 2 weeks to clean. But the problem is bigger than that, because, when you have, how many of you have toddlers, and it just seems like every single time you clean your floors, they are dirty again, right? We have a cat that's shedding his winter coat, even though we're in Florida. I don't think he got the memo. And then, just toddler stuff and walking in and out of the house. And it's like, so we needed something. Okay. We definitely had a problem. So if that makes sense to you, let me know. But that's define whether or not you have a problem. Okay. That's super important. And then the next thing that you want to ask yourself is, do I already have something that will solve that problem? Right. So if I go back to my, kind of my dirty floor solution, do I have something? Well, I've got my existing vacuum, right? I've got, I've got brooms, I've got other tools around the house. Will those solve the problem that I have? They will, except the fact that, finding the time to be able to use them, has become a problem. And so, I think a lot of times when, somebody's like, oh my God, if you just buy this one more course, if you just buy this one more tool, if you just buy this one piece of software, it's going to revolutionize your life. How many of you have like 80 planners at home that are half used? And if I just buy this one more planner, it's going to be the planner that solves all the problems. Not all these are tech tools. I'll tell you, I have a shelf of half-used planners before I found the planner that I'm using right now. Okay. And so not all of these things are technological solutions. Sometimes it's, it's the planner or the calendar, or if I do, this type of productivity system versus that productivity system, or maybe if I get Trello instead of Asana, instead of instead of Monday, and so whatever the tool is, and somebody says, well, if you just add this tool to your business, it is going to be amazing. Okay. I want to ask yourself, okay, do I have something else that would solve the problem? Right. And maybe it's not, maybe my problem is not the perfect planner. Maybe it's me coming up with a system that is simple enough that I'm going to follow it. Right. That's why I'm a really big fan of my 3x3, because it is a super simple plan to ground yourself every single morning. It only takes, about 2 minutes to do it, but it really gives you perspective for the day. And for me, it kind of energizes me to keep going, right? Or to start going in the morning. And my 3x3, if you're new and you haven't heard the 3x3, my 3x3 is every morning, write down 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you like about yourself, and 3 things you want. Okay. And that's going to ground you really, really well for the day. But I think sometimes we overcomplicate the problem that we have, right? We think that we need a complex solution, when I think a lot of times what I found works for me is to actually try to come up with a simpler solution. Okay. A less complicated solution. So again, the first one is, do I have a problem? The second question is, do I have something else that would solve that problem? Okay. And I see this a lot with like with the meal kits. The people are like ordering meal kits, and I think that's a really cool solution. But I also know that like grocery stores have a lot of like beautiful prepared meals that you could just pop in the oven. Costco has them, Publix has them, Fresh Market has them, lots and lots of grocery stores, and they're healthy, they're nutritious. You add a salad and dinner is done, right? And so that's even easier than going online, ordering HelloFresh or whatever you're using, having it delivered, putting it away, prepping dinner. Like, I love a couple days a week going to, I go to Costco, get a couple of those meals and pop them in the oven, and then they're done. Okay. So what was the last of the 3? Okay. So Nina's asking, what's the last of the 3? Hey, Nina. It is, so the 3 again are 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 things that you like about yourself, and 3 things that you want. Okay. And the reason why those are important is because the 3 things you're grateful for ground you in reality right now, right? They help with your positivity in your perspective. 3 things you like about yourself helps you rebuild your relationship with yourself. I'm reading High 5 Habits for our book club in Empower Bookkeeper Network. And, one of the things that she says is that if you're struggling with your relationships with other people, it may be because you're struggling with your relationship with yourself, because that's the first relationship we have to build in order to be able to have relationships with other people. And I think a lot, especially women, like, we are so hard on ourselves. And so it's really, really important to build that relationship with yourself if you want to build your business. I think it's critically important. And then 3 things you want helps you drive forward, right? So I want these 3 things. How am I going to achieve them? I need to get off my butt and get moving, right? In order to be able to get the things that I want. And I want them to be things that you want, not things you want for your kids, not things you want for your spouse, not things you want for other people. What are 3 things you want for you? Okay, because I think that's really important to keeping us motivated. Okay, so the third question I want you to ask yourself before you buy a solution, okay, is how much friction is this problem causing? Okay, so if I go back to my analogy with the vacuum, for me, like, if the floors are dirty in my house, it just drives me crazy. It really does, especially if it's like dust and dirt and things that we're tracking in the house. It drives me nuts. And the reason that the friction is important is because you're like, yes, I have this problem and it doesn't really bother me very much. And, it covers a small area. Like, a lot of times when we're coming in and out, I have this little handheld vacuum, right? And I'll just kind of grab it and I'll get up around the, whatever mess Eric makes around the kitchen table. And that's great. And that's awesome. And that works for a lot of the issues that we have. right? So you have to determine how much angst, how much problem, like how big is this problem, right? Because it's important to know how big the problem is, because then you can determine how big the solution needs to be, right? So if it's something like, yeah, it doesn't really bother me, then you don't need a big solution. You may not need any solution, right? Because the problem is not that troublesome. And then the fourth thing you want to ask, again, do you have a problem? Do you have something else that would solve the problem? How much friction is the problem causing? And then the fourth thing I want you to ask is, how hard will it be to learn the solution? Right? Because if learning the solution is more difficult than dealing with the problem, then it might not be the right solution, right? So, and I see this a lot with QuickBooks, right? For people, when you're a business owner, they say, okay, get a system to track your income and expenses. And people go, okay, so I'm going to get this system. And then they don't invest the time in learning how to use the system. And then they mess up the system. And then they hate the system. I cannot tell you how many people tell me, I hate QuickBooks Online. And I'm like, well, how much time have you invested in learning QuickBooks Online? And they say, well, I bought the software and it's supposed to be easy to use, and I just started using it. And I said, okay, great. Well, how long did you take to spend, how much time did you spend learning how to use the software? And they didn't. And my bookkeepers and bookkeeper training school are always amazed, at how messy people's books are a lot of times when they take them over. And it's like, well, think about it. If you had never learned how to use the software and you were just diving in, then you would probably make a mess of the software as well. But because you've taken the time to go through this course and learn how the software works and do your Pro Advisor certification exam and we just got off an office hour call, let me tell you, where we were fixing one of the students' QuickBooks files. And like, how did it get so messy? Like, well, because the client didn't know how to use it. And I think so often we buy these solutions, right? And I can even go back to the planners, right? You buy these solutions, but then you do not block off the time to learn how to use them, or to fit them into your daily life every day. So it's like, here's, my planner. I'm currently using the Monk manual because my dad bought me a Monk manual for my birthday in December, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I like the planner I was using before, but I actually like this one a little bit better. I think it's a little bit more simplistic, and I needed that pullback a little bit. But it accomplishes the things that I need it to accomplish. And we're going to talk about requirements later this week about, how do you determine what you need in a solution, okay? But this planner only works if I block off the time every morning to look at it, and I block off the time every afternoon to wrap up my day. I call it my shutdown, and transfer over, okay, what didn't I get done? What does my day look like tomorrow? And this is the same for bookkeeper training school. People like, well, how long is it going to take me to replace my full-time income in bookkeeper training school? Well, that depends on you. There's 70 hours of content in the course. How much time do you have and how much energy do you have to devote to the course? Because if you say, look, I work 80 hours a week, every single week, and I have 3 kids, and I have obligations with church, and I've got obligations in my community, don't buy bookkeeper training school. You don't have time. No solution that you buy for anything is going to be the magic pill. And so that's why, I wanted to do this video today, and I know that it's not like the sexiest video in the whole world, but it's really important when you see these solutions that say, this is going to make your life better, this is going to make things amazing. You got to ask yourself, do I have the bandwidth to fit this into my reality the way it is right now? And if the answer is no, then you say, okay, what am I going to either change so that I can fit this reality in, or when am I going to do this? Because it's not going to be right now. And I think that just applies to all solutions that are in front of you. And why it's really important when you see those, those shiny objects, sit there and go, okay, is this something I really need right now? And that's why I think those questions are so important. So again, the 4 questions are, do I have a problem? Do I have something else that would solve that problem? How much friction is this problem causing? So how difficult is this making my life? And then number 4 is, how hard will it be to learn the solution? And do I have the bandwidth right now to fully implement that solution in my life? Okay. And so that's why I'm really excited. We're reading High 5 Habits in the Empower Bookkeeper Network this quarter. Next quarter, so starting in July, we're going to start reading Atomic Habits, which is all about how to change your habits a little bit at a time, and really understanding what it takes to fully implement new habits or to break bad habits. So I'm super excited about that. I love doing book club with EBN and sharing that kind of stuff with them. So I'd love to know what you guys think. What are the shiny objects right now that you are seeing in your life? You're kind of like, no, I don't know if I'm ready for this yet or not. But would love to see what you guys are grappling with. So to give you guys a solution, what we ended up doing for the floor solution is we ended up getting a robot vacuum, and we bought an iRobot robot vacuum that is programmable, so that we can say, like, okay, we want you to vacuum this area of the floor at this time. It's super cool. It's mapped our whole house, and it goes off like 3 times a day, which is pretty awesome. I have not manually vacuumed my house since we bought it. Like, that is how cool this thing is. And it was funny because we first bought it, I'm like, it's not going to be that good, and I'm still going to have to vacuum, and I don't. It's awesome. It works really, really well. It does the kitchen, I think, 3 times a day, and around the kitchen table and everything. It is super good at like getting into all the nooks and crannies and corners, and it's low profile, so it gets under things. So now Jeff wants to get the robot mop. And so if any of you have a robot mop, I'd love to know what you think of your robot mop and if it is worth the money, because I'm trying to figure out, like, is this something that we should do? Because like Jeff is like all on board with the robot mop. So yeah, so that's what we ended up doing, and it was worth it. So if I go through, like, do we have a problem? Yes. We did not have time to keep up the floors in our house. Did I have something else that would solve the problem? Yeah, I've got a manual vacuum and I've got brooms, but did they, they still took time, right? And I didn't have the time to be able to do it. How much friction was it causing? It was causing me a lot of stress to know that, to know that that the floors weren't clean, right? That we were tracking stuff like into the carpets and stuff, and we had like new carpets. How hard was it to learn the solution? So Jeff programmed the whole thing. Basically, like, he hit a couple buttons, it diagnosed the rooms, and then he went into the app and was like, okay, this is the kitchen, this is the living room, this is Eric's room, and he tagged all the rooms. It figured out which rooms had carpet and which ones had tile. And then he could literally say, like, okay, in the morning, we want you to vacuum this and this, and you would just click on it. And then the afternoon at 1 o'clock, we want you to vacuum this and this. And it was like within 15 minutes, he had the whole thing programmed for, when it was going to vacuum and do its thing. And so, like, for me, that checked off all the boxes, right? That checked off all the boxes for, this is what I need for the solution. It's going to reduce the friction. It was super easy to implement. And so it was awesome. It was great. Okay. And so it's like the perfect example of buying something that does solve the problem that you have. And so just make sure that you ask yourself those 4 questions whenever you are presented with a shiny object. All right, I hope that this was helpful for you. Again, we're going to be talking about tech and tools and solutions all month long for bookkeepers and for other service-based businesses. I'd love to know if you guys have any questions about this kind of stuff. Please let me know. You can go to askkristen.net, check off the box for Facebook Lives, and we will include your question in our lives this month. All right, take care, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.